3 years ago, when we last gathered here with trumpets and timpani and lilies and children and Easter eggs to celebrate the resurrection. Looking back, I've been thinking about how we took that Easter Sunday for granted, how maybe we took every Easter Sunday for granted, how many things we took for granted. Back then, resurrection came once a year like clockwork. Easter Sunday was tried and true. There's the Vidor, and Jesus Christ is risen today, and lilies and children and chocolate bunnies. Every year. It's what we do. It's what we've been doing. It was Easter. Except that since 2019, it hasn't been. 2 years of being thrown off course, of making do and doing our Zoom best. 2 years of what had always been true was no longer true. 2 years that have felt in so many ways like an unending Lent, like every day a new Good Friday, every day staring death right down the block. And yet here we are. Here you all are in so many ways, in new ways that weren't possible 3 years ago. Here we are, some of you here in your Easter finery in this sanctuary, which feels like home, or maybe a new place that you want to check out again. We're so glad you're here. And some of you in your Easter finest pajamas at home in a new sanctuary that you've discovered, and I'm so glad you're here. So many new ways of doing resurrection. However you have found yourselves here, here we are. Here we are. Here we are, a changed church from when we were last here, and not without our losses. Here we are, a people that have come looking for, well, for what exactly? Here we are, COVID-worn and not without our bruises. And we hear this story that Mark read to us from Pennsylvania, right here on West 77th Street this morning, that Mark read to us this story from the Gospel of John about how early on the morning of that first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to a tomb where Jesus had been laid, looking for Jesus. This is where I left him. He should be here. But she didn't find him. Not the way that she had expected, anyway. And not at first. What did you come here looking for today? When you logged into Zoom or crossed the threshold here, what did you come expecting? Have you found it? Was it all just as you expected? Did you come looking for Easter of 2019 or Easter of 2020 or Easter of 2021, hoping to find the past among the present? Have we come looking for tradition or connection or an old friend? Early on the morning of that first week, Mary went looking for what she thought she knew. The body of her friend that had been brutally executed just 2 days before, and she didn't find it. If you thought you knew what you were coming here looking for today, maybe you won't find it either. And this is the thing about resurrection. It's not what we know or what we think we know. It's not what we expect. It doesn't come on demand. If these COVID years have taught us anything, if the current uptick in our city that has some of our friends here today worshiping at home rather than in this sanctuary, if we have learned anything over 2 years, is that try as we might, we have little control over the timing of when new life will come or how. Mary went looking for the dead, where the dead are supposed to be. How did she know that he was not dead, but alive in a new way? How do each of us know, creatures of habit that we are, lovers of tradition, heirs of this is how it's done. How often do we go looking for the dead in our lives, expecting to find the past, only to be met with the present? What does an Easter faith, the faith of this day, what does resurrection mean to us if this is what we do? Sad and confused, staying back after the two guys that she was with, the two brave guys who got there first, they had run, they left. There alone in the tomb is the woman. Mary entered that tomb, and she found it not empty at all. There, sitting on the place where the body was supposed to be, were two angels dressed all in white. "Why are you weeping?" they ask her. Which, for those of you who know anything about care or empathy, this is not the question that you ask the grieving. Angels should have known better. And just after they ask her, she then turns around to find a third strange man has entered the room behind her, and he asks the question again, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And perhaps a little tired of how these three men don't get it, and the two guys that she came with had deserted her, maybe she's starting to get a little upset. And she begs this third man to tell her simply, "Where have you taken him?" She didn't know it was Jesus. We very seldomly do. And the third man's reply was simply, "Mary." And in that moment, she recognized that it was Jesus, and joy overcame her. Let's recap that story really quickly. Mary goes looking for the body of a man she watched die on a cross on Friday. The body isn't there, but there are these two incredibly beautiful men dressed all in white, angels they're called, who can't understand why she's upset. Then a third man sneaks into the tomb and again fails to understand the calamity that has befallen this poor woman. Looking back on it, it's an odd scene. Jesus sneaks into a tomb to confront Mary. Angels failing to understand human emotion. Three men and a woman walk into a tomb. It's odd, right? Maybe it's a little surprising. Certainly it's not what we think of now when we think of change management theory or how to effectively grow the church. Some better communication would have been more helpful, angels. Hey, Jesus, maybe begin with a memo or at least an introduction of who you are. Don't sneak up on people. The disciples certainly should have received a calendar invite prior to Sunday morning to tell them they didn't want to miss this meeting, but they did. There's a lot that could have gone really differently. A lot that didn't need to change the course of the world. Why do we look for the living among the dead? Why do we look for what is past in the future? Human nature, then and now. We want our city back the way it was before COVID. We want our church back the way it was whenever you thought it was perfect, but I guarantee you there are as many ideas of that date as there are people here. We want our lives back before the pandemic. We want our old friends back. We want the people who have died back. I want them back. We want it all back exactly the way we left it. Or at least the way that we thought we knew we left it. What did we know then that we don't know now? What do we know now that we didn't know then, that we couldn't have imagined? How has life changed? Like it or not, it has. In the day of resurrection that is still to come, the prophet Isaiah tells us, "The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind." And this is a sign of grace and of forgiveness, of faith and of hope. It may feel impossible. It's how God works. And in that day, which could be this day, it could be this resurrection day, God tells God's people to be glad. and to rejoice in what I, your God, am creating new for you this day. Rejoice, for I am creating your city as a joy, and I am creating you, my people, as a delight to me. Notice that God is not telling us to be joyful about the things that God has already created. God isn't resting on the laurels of the daffodils and the bird song and the sunrise and all the beauty that we knew when we came in this morning. God is telling us to delight in what is not yet, but is coming soon, what God is creating right now, in our midst, with us, calling our names. Delight and find joy in that. Find joy in what is new. People of God, this is not our strong suit. God's endless imagination is something we love on paper. We love it for other people. We love it for big problems that we can't fix, like poverty and war and racism. God, do a new thing for all those things. But me, I'm fine. God's endless imagination is something that gets a little too real the closer to home it gets. When a new thing starts happening in our lives, we start getting nervous. But resurrection is not always about the big things. Sometimes it's about the little things, like a butterfly flapping its wings. Little resurrection, the return of an old friend, the return to a sanctuary, the gift of a new way of working or of coming to church, the hug or a meal that we can share, the smile that we can see. A little resurrection, like a little butterfly, can change the world. Standing in the tomb, Mary calls out in pain, and Jesus calls out her name. Mary, he says, and it's as if the scales fall from her eyes. She recognizes Jesus in the sound of her own name. She recognizes Jesus because they have a relationship. They know each other. She's heard her name called 1,000,000 times before by that beloved. She knows what it sounds like, and all those countless years of knowing him and knowing him through and through, she knows it's him in that moment. Psychologists know that the brain lights up in specific and highly active ways when we hear our own names. Babies giggle at the sound of it. Dogs come bounding to it. Cats generally ignore it. And said sweetly by ones who love us, our name can soften us. It can comfort us. It can help us. And that's how I think Jesus said Mary that day. Softly and tenderly, the hymn tells us, Jesus called to Mary that day. And in an instant, she knew that what she had been looking for was gone and would never come back. And in its place was something new and known and loved. What is past is not what is future. God is doing a new thing, and here Jesus says, Mary. And maybe Jesus says your name today too. I know it does. Maybe you'll hear it in the trumpets or the lilies. Maybe you'll hear it not in metaphor, but by the sound of a young child getting their first Easter egg in the hunt to follow. Maybe you'll hear it around a dinner table. Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling. I have seen the Lord, she proclaims, as she rejoins the disciples later that morning. I have seen the Lord, she says, and she knows the world has changed. I have seen the Lord. What is past is no more. Death has lost its sting. Weeping is no more. I have seen the Lord, she says, and there is joy and there is delight in what new thing God is doing. Jesus knows all of your names, each of them. The ones your parents gave you, the ones you choose among chosen family, the ones that save you, the one that is whispered by your beloved on a pillow that makes you a little uncomfortable, the one that your children call you, the one that your grandchildren call you, your name. Maybe you'll hear it here again today. Listen. Maybe it'll be an old friend on the sidewalk calling out, or a new friend asking, "What's your name?" And as you hear it, as you listen today, as you listen for signs of resurrection, see what scales might fall from your eyes and what simple truth is standing right in front of you that you need to see. What new thing is it? What creation is God giving to you for this day of joy? And what new thing is God giving to you so that God may take delight every day? I have seen the Lord, Mary proclaimed. May you see the Lord this day too. Happy Easter. Do not look for the living among the dead. Christ is alive. Christ is alive indeed. Alleluia.